Son, we need to have a chat about internet safety. I slowly crumpled down onto the floor next to him. His laptop was open and he was playing Minecraft on a public server. His eyes were locked into the action. Comments scrolled down the side of the screen in a chat box. Son, can you stop your game for a minute? He exited the world, closed the laptop, and looked up at me. Dad, is this going to be another cheesy, scary story? What? I faked hurt feelings for a second, and then grinned at him. I thought you liked my cautionary tales. He grew up listening to my stories about children who encountered witches, ghosts, werewolves, and trolls. Like many generations of parents, I use scary stories to reinforce morals and teach lessons about safety. Single dads like me should use all the parenting tools at their disposal. He scrunched his face a little. They were fine when I was 6, but now that I'm getting older, they don't scare me anymore. They seem kinda silly. If you are going to tell a story about the internet, can you make it really, really scary? I squinted at him incredulously. He folded his arms. Dad, I'm 10 and I can handle it. Okay, I'll try. I began. Once upon a time, there was a boy named Colby. His expression indicated that he wasn't impressed with the terror of the introduction. He sighed deeply and settled in for one of Dad's cheesy stories. I continued. Colby went online and joined several children's websites. After a while, he started talking to other kids in-game and on the message boards. He made friends with another 10-year-old boy named Helper23. They liked the same video games and shows. They laughed at each other's jokes. They explored new games together. After several months of friendship, Colby gave Helper23 6 diamonds in a game they were playing. This was a very generous gift. Colby's birthday was coming up, and Helper23 wanted to send him a cool present in real life. Colby figured it wouldn't hurt to give Helper23 his home address, as long as he promised not to tell it to any strangers or grown-ups. Helper23 swore he wouldn't tell anyone else, not even his own parents, and set about mailing the package. I paused the story and asked my son, "Do you think that was a good idea?" "No," he said, shaking his head vigorously. In spite of himself, he was getting into the story. Well, neither did Colby. Colby felt guilty about giving away his home address, and his guilt began to grow and grow. By the time he put on his pajamas the next night, his guilt and fear were larger than anything else in his life. He resolved to admit the truth to his parents. The punishment would be steep, but it was worth it to have a clear conscience. He squirmed in his bed as he waited for his parents to tuck him in. My son knew the scary part was coming up, in spite of his tough talk. He leaned forward wide-eyed. I spoke quietly and deliberately. He heard all the noises of the house. The washing machine bounced around in the laundry room. Branches scraped against the brick outside his room. His baby brother cooed in the nursery, and there were some other noises he couldn't quite pinpoint. Finally, his dad's footsteps echoed down the hall. "Hey, Dad," he called out nervously. "I have something to tell you." His dad stuck his head in the doorway at a weird angle. In the darkness, his mouth didn't seem to move and the eyes were all wrong. "Yes, son." The voice was way off too. "Are you okay, Dad?" the boy asked. "Uh-huh," sung the father in his strangely affected voice. Colby pulled his covers up defensively. Is Mom around?" "Here I am." Mom's head popped into the doorway below Dad's. Her voice was an unnatural falsetto. "Were you about to tell us that you gave our home address to Helper23? You shouldn't have done that. We told you never to give out personal information on the internet." She continued, "He wasn't really a kid. He just pretended to be one. Do you know what he did? He came to our house, broke in, and murdered both of us, just so he could spend some time with you." A fat man in a wet jacket emerged in the child's doorway, holding the 2 severed heads. Colby shrieked and gasped as the man dropped the heads on the ground, unsheathed his knife, and moved into the room to work on the boy. My son screamed too. He twisted his hands defensively over his face, but we were just getting started with the story. After several hours, the boy was almost dead, and his screams had become whimpers. The killer noticed the wailing of a baby in another room and removed his knife from Colby. This was a special treat. He had never murdered a baby before and was excited about the prospect. Helper23 left Colby to die and followed the cries through the house like a homing beacon. In the nursery, he walked to the crib, picked the baby up, and held it in his arms. He moved towards the changing table to get a better look, but as he held the baby, the crying died down. The baby looked up and smiled. Helper 23 had never held a baby, but he gently bounced it in his arms like a pro. He wiped his bloody hands on the blanket so he could stroke the baby's cheek. "Hey there, sweet little guy." The beautiful rage of sadism melted into something warmer and softer. He walked out of the nursery, took the baby home, named him William, and raised him as his very own. After I finished the story, my son was visibly shaken. Between ragged staccato breaths, he stammered, "But Dad, my name's William." I gave him a classic dad wink and tousled his hair. "Of course it is, son." William ran up the stairs to his bedroom in a fury of sobs, but deep down, I think he liked the story. My sister and I never got along too well growing up. She had the most grating voice imaginable, and she used it solely to annoy me. Like nails on a chalkboard, she'd screech her way into my brain. "Have you been to Bora Bora yet?" "Oh, I don't suppose you have. You know, with your job and everything, you just have to go. Me and the hubby went last week, but I'm sure it'd be just as fun by yourself. Or you could go and find yourself a man to take you if you ever went out and got some sun." She just goes on and on. How would she know what it's like to live my life? She got all the best part of our parents, our mother's beautiful complexion, our father's piercing blue eyes. Me? I was born to live a life of mediocrity and with a body to match it. My metabolism switched off at 16, so I've put on a few pounds since then. My muddy brown eyes and frizzy hair didn't do a lot to supplement my doer personality. She had it all. How did she have the right to critique me? All of this was fine until her divorce. She needed a place to stay, so she basically invited herself to live with me through the whole process. If you think her divorce did anything to quell her incessant nagging and criticisms, you'd be dead wrong. I think the stress actually made her worse. Every single day I was a prisoner in my own home. Every time I left my room was a chance for her to sink her fangs into me and talk my ear off about some inane bullshit. This went on for weeks and weeks through her messy divorce. One particular night she had a few too many glasses of wine, and she started on one of her epic, multi-hour rants. I wasn't just going to sit there anymore and be her therapist, so I stood up and walked off into my bedroom. But then she followed me. "How dare you just walk off when I'm talking to you? Is that any way to treat your own sister? What would Mum say?" I couldn't take any more, so I killed her. I got up off the bed, grabbed a lamp and beat her death. It was the first time in many, many years I'd felt that good. Ironically, straddled over her unrecognizable corpse, I decided I would turn my life around. So I washed my hands of the gore, threw the body out under the porch, and went to bed. The next day after work, I went to the gym and ran my ass off. I felt so light and free, knowing I would head home without that nagging bitch there to ruin my night. Except, when I got home, she was there, in the same damn outfit on my couch, sipping her fancy wine. "Oh, thank God you're back. You just won't believe what my ex-husband said today at court," she said, giving me the once-over. "Oh God, what happened to you? You look terrible." I couldn't understand what was happening, but I had already decided I wasn't going to put up with this anymore, so I killed her again, this time with a kitchen knife. I leapt over the couch, blade in hand, and made her insides her outsides. I cleaned the knife before taking her body out to the porch, but when I got there I couldn't believe my eyes. Her body was still lying there on the dirt. I didn't know what to think. I just tossed her fresh body on top of the old one and went back inside. Every day I came home it was the same thing. Little things changed, like where she was sitting or how I killed her. But every single day after the gym, I'd come home and she was still there. By the end of the month, I had a pile of corpses under the porch, so high it was spilling out into the yard. Meanwhile, no matter what I did at the gym, I never got any healthier. I couldn't drop the weight. No matter how long and hard I ran, I didn't drop a single pound, but none of that mattered to me when I met Nick. I met Nick at the gym one evening on my way out, and we hit off. We went downtown, had some drinks, and he said he'd call me soon so we could hang out again. I was completely smitten with him. It had been so long since a guy had even so much as talked to me. But Nick never called. I waited and waited, and it became increasingly clear that he had stood me up. I skipped work and waited outside the gym all day for him to show up. Finally, around 7 p.m. he came out. tired and sweaty from his usual routine. I jumped out of my car and ran over to him. He noticed me and I waved, but he just seemed to ignore me and walk over to his car. I wasn't going to just stop there. He had to give me an answer for all the missed calls and the hours I had waited on him. I caught up to him, but he didn't even look me in the eye. "Geez, can't you take a hint? I'm just not that into you. I'm sore," he said, but I didn't let him finish. I jammed my nail file into his eyes. He barely had time to scream, and then I bashed his brains out onto the pavement. God, that felt good. I got back in my car and headed home. Guess I won't be going back to that gym anytime soon. When I walked in the door, my sister was waiting for me. Ha 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 ha. How could you think he'd be into you? How could you think anyone would be into someone like you? She cackled. I ran bloodlusted at her, but tonight she fought back. It didn't matter for her, though. For once, I was thankful for my heavier build and weight. Once she lay lifelessly, I didn't even bother to throw her body out. It wouldn't have fit under the porch anyways. I crawled into bed and was nearly asleep when there was a knock on the door. "Open up, San Francisco Police Department. We have some questions for about the disappearance of your sister, Mrs. Sinclair." I crawled out of bed and made my way to the door. I stepped over her body and the blood pooling on the floor. I'm not worried. I don't have anything to hide. As soon as I opened the door, they were on me. I was handcuffed and arrested on the spot. Apparently someone had seen the vicious display outside of the gym, and they had found my sister's body underneath my porch, now many weeks old and rotted beyond recognition. I didn't even care at this point. I admitted to all of it, and they sentenced me to life without parole. At least I'll never have to see my sister's snobby face again, I thought. I was placed in solitary, since I was deemed too dangerous and unstable for Gen Pop, but when I walked in my cell there, she sat against the padded walls, familiar wineglass still in hand. She laughed and laughed as I beat her with my fists. I beat her till my hands turned black and blue, but she never stopped laughing. I was stuck here with her. Forever. Three months ago, my 6-year-old daughter, Haley, suddenly vanished. One night I put her to bed, and the next morning she wasn't there. My husband and I were frantic. We let the entire town know that our daughter was gone, and we examined the whole area to find her. When we didn't find her over the whole month, we started to lose hope. When the second month of her being missing came to a close, me, my husband, the police, and all the people of our town assumed that Haley was gone. It was now March 6th. At this point, I had barely been at work and decided to come back, so I've woken up early. As I walked down the stairs drowsily to the kitchen, I saw Haley. She was sitting on the couch, just sitting. I shook my head to get rid of the hallucination, but it didn't go away. She didn't go away. "Mother," she said. I didn't hesitate, and I ran up and embraced my daughter, or what I thought was her. "I missed you so much. Mommy missed you so much." I sobbed as I squeezed her. Haley just replied, "Yes, Mother, I know." I missed work that day. Once I stopped embracing Haley, I realized that for being gone for 2 months, my daughter was incredibly clean, as if she had just come home from school. When Haley's dad got home, he had a similar reaction, embracing her daughter and sobbing into her shoulder. All that Haley said was, yes, Father," patting his back. My husband ignored this unusual behavior because she had been missing for 2 whole months. The next day, me and my husband took Haley to the doctor to check if she was okay. When the doctor checked her, it didn't take long because the doctor said that she was completely fine. I took her home, thrilled that my daughter was fine. 2 nights later I woke up and I needed to go pee. I looked at my phone and it was around 3:05 a.m. As I left the bathroom and approached my bedroom, I saw a figure in the hallway. "Honey," I said, thinking it was Haley. I reached for the light switch, and as soon as I flickered it up, she was gone. The hallway was empty. I ran to Hallie's room, and there she was, sound asleep. I walked back to my bedroom, just blaming the incident on my drowsiness. This happened a few times after that, and Haley's been back for only a month. But a few weeks later, something happened, and I don't think I can blame it on my drowsiness. I suddenly was inclined to wake up, and I looked at my phone, 3:03 a.m. I didn't need to get up, but I looked at the door. There was Haley, just standing there, but in her hand something was gleaming. The moment I realized what it was, I shook my husband awake, telling him Haley was holding a knife. He woke up, and when I went to show him, it wasn't there. I had to eventually get over it and continue to treat my daughter normally as I set her off to school that day. Now let me get this straight. Haley would act normal the rest of the time, just little slits of time. She would become different and then convert back to her normal self. But sometimes she would forget obvious things like family traditions, her toys, etc. This would happen more often than not. She would also say mother and father instead of mommy and daddy, like she did before she went missing. One night we were sitting on the couch and watching the 8 Mile news. Haley had begged to stay up and watch with me and was sitting across the room with me. At one point she said, "Mother, look." I ignored the sinister smile on her face and listened. Breaking news, dead body found inside Piker Forest. Body was identified as 6-year-old Haley Carroll. Police have estimated her death March 6, 2018, only a month ago. I don't know what I'm living with, but it's not my daughter. I cannot describe to you how I feel right now. What I'm experiencing is so detached from the normal. I'm almost convinced I've finally gone insane. Almost. My wife, B, died during childbirth. She was gorgeous, funny, intelligent, stubborn. A woman whose laugh was so loud, eating in restaurants was a challenge, and whose stare was so intense it made my hands shake. I lost her as she gave birth to our daughter, Sam. Of course, I could have resented Sam for taking away what was once mine. In a way, nothing else can be, for taking what was so truly and utterly pure. But I didn't. I knew Bea wouldn't have wanted any resentment. She wouldn't have wanted our only child to have a life ruined by hate. But this isn't about grief. This isn't about the physical sucker punch of losing forever something you loved. This is about something far more sinister. My daughter was lively, always running and screaming, leaping up and down the climbing frame, causing havoc in her nursery classes. So for her 6th birthday, a trip with friends to the movies had left her so pent up with energy, I could barely keep up with her, as she dipped and dodged between people on the pavement. She'd occasionally turn back through the sea of people and shout, "Daddy, come on," in a tone that was almost petulant. I couldn't help but love her. I tried to chase her. I really did. She was too busy looking at me when she dashed out into the road, and the bus didn't have time to stop. A sickening crunch, and the world fell silent. I cradled her broken form in my arms, too numb to weep, too hurt to move. All I could feel was the warm blood gently seep into my clothes. In the state of shock I was in, I could just think about how I was going to wash my jeans. It sounds horrid, I know. But a loss like that tears everything away from you and leaves you with only the bare thought process that make us human. The next week was a blur. I cannot place a single memory to a time in between friends and family extending their condolences and the howling sobs of mine that would break out at any moment. A door slamming, the gentle hum of the fridge, or voices laughing on the radio. I attended her funeral dressed all in black. By dressed, I don't mean merely clothes. My very essence was dark. I couldn't feel or think, and the day continued as I went through the motions like a dying man treading water. Everyone wanted to tell me about Sam and how perfect she was, what an angel she was, as if I didn't know, as if I didn't realize what a gift my own daughter was. The man stood out from the rest as he walked up to me and handed me this large leather book. I assumed at the time he was a parent of one of Sam's friends, handing me a collection of their photos together. Or maybe I was too numb to even process his cold hands and how he never mentioned my daughter once. For a month, I was lost. I drank and stayed in our now empty apartment alone, watching old box sets, too numb now to even cry. It was only when my sister arrived, when she held my hand and talked to me, that I began to come out of my shell. She'd sit and listen to the most inane things I said, and gently coaxed me out of my depression. Not completely, but enough for me to begin to live what was almost a real life again. That was when I opened the book. I'd decided to remember Sam for all the joy she gave, and was prepared to reflect on her life without feeling miserable. I opened to the first page. It was essentially a binder full of Polaroid photos of my daughter growing up. I furrowed my brow. They were taken from a distance, blurred slightly, and I was in a few of them. I began to feel sick, but hoped that the following photos would provide some explanation. I came up with every excuse of how the man obtained these photos, desperate to view the moments of my daughter's life without a sense of trepidation. The photos grew closer and closer to my daughter's birthday. I could see the day I gave her, a tiny bike after she turned 5, and the skinned knees that ensued. The book had so many more pages that I assumed the rest were empty. But there was a photo of her just before the movies on her 6th birthday. I could recognize the pink raincoat she insisted on wearing and my hands on her shoulders. There was no photo of the crash. Instead, her life continued inside this book. Her 7th birthday had a photo of me and her in the garden, covered in paint, with a huge canvas on the floor and an extremely messy painting. Her 7th birthday. Her 7th birthday. The reality of what I was seeing hit me then, and I slammed the book shut. I sat there at the kitchen table staring at the leather. This must be some sadistic Photoshop, I hoped. Someone had taken the time to pull a horrid prank on me. I say I hoped because essentially I couldn't believe the other explanation, if there even was one. Gritting my teeth, I decided I had nothing to lose and kept reading. I can't explain the emotions I felt whilst I read accurately, listening to the sound of the page turning. I can try, but nothing could prepare you for something like this. Her life continued, showing her losing her baby teeth, her first day of senior school. My turning of the pages became more frenzied, and I began to notice something. The photographer was getting closer, closer to her. As she grew older, not in every photo but a general trend, the photographer was getting closer and closer. More daring perhaps. She was beautiful, stunning. As a teenager, she looked just like her mother, all curls and smiles. I grew older too, but the photos began to include me less and less. Her 16th birthday was strange. A group of her friends sitting outside, drinking from little plastic cups at a picnic, but there was someone in the background. Near the bushes of the park where this was taken, a dark figure stood. You wouldn't have noticed him if not for the small shadow he cast on the grass. I leant back for a moment and exhaled. This was too weird. I'd been so caught up in watching my little girl grow up, I hadn't thought about how this would end. Moments like this are so utterly surreal that sometimes you remove yourself from them. I almost felt like I was watching myself read these, like this was a dream or a program on the television. I continued. The dark figure became more and more present in each photograph. I could almost make out features. His presence was towering, and as I turned the page, I expected to see him disappear. But instead, as the photographs grew closer to her 18th, each birthday was marked by a caption underneath the Polaroid saying, "Another year." She was no longer somewhere I recognized. Instead, the photos were of her in a dimly lit house, her face contorted by fear, striking all sorts of weird poses. Sometimes she would be dressed like an ancient queen, or she would be dressed like a maid scrubbing the floors. The figure was there, even closer now. His legs or his arm would appear in each and every one. No matter how she was dressed, in every photo, her face had this desperately pained expression. It killed me. There were bruises on her face. She looked thin, ill even. I couldn't do it. This was sick. Properly sick. My girl. I soldiered on. The last photo I looked at before I slammed the book shut and swore to never ever look at it again was of her 18th. The caption underneath read, "At last," in sloppy writing. She was looking straight at the camera, crying. She was on her knees, dressed in a black evening dress, with an apple in her mouth and her hands bound behind her back. Her makeup was ruined by her tears. It was as if she was pleading me, begging me to help, but I couldn't. I closed the book and left the room, my whole body convulsing with sobs. I couldn't call the police, of course. She was dead. The thing that keeps me up at night isn't the content of what I saw, it's that there were so many pages left. My sister had a teddy bear, a scary teddy bear. I do not know why, but it creeped me out. It was just so disturbing to me The thing had eyes that looked so real. It was as if it was made from a real bear, and its face was just blank and unsettling. I first started to get weird feelings about the bear when my sister first got it. She was only a baby at the time, and I was about 4. We had a dog, and he had a habit of eating things, so my mother always had to put it up on the small cabinet in the corner of the hallway upstairs. Every time I went up those stairs, I saw that creepy bear suddenly glare around the corner at me, as if it was watching me. This wasn't the weird part. It started to get really weird about 5 years later. At the age of 6 or 7, my sister had lost interest in the bear, so my mother just threw it in the old toy cupboard. The only problem was that the cupboard was in my room. When I was 9, old enough to stay in my own room, and got to bed without any assistance, every night I would get into my bed and turn my lamp off. This is when it got scary. As I was getting some sleep, I suddenly remembered my mum putting that teddy in the cupboard. I slowly turned to look over across my room to see it through the glass. My heart suddenly stopped as I thought about the horror the plush had caused me, but at the age of 9, I wanted to grow up and lose my fears, so I just shook it off and put my head on the pillow. When I got up to pull my sheets on a bit further, I noticed something that would scar me for life. There sat, at the end of my bedroom, the teddy. My heart started beating abnormally again. I sat there staring at it for about a minute. When I needed to yawn, I closed my eyes. I opened them to see the teddy sitting closer to my bed. At this point, I was really freaked out. I started to move back to the wall and looked around to see if there was any sign that anyone had come in. When I looked back to see the teddy on the end of my bed, I was so startled that I almost fainted from fear. When I blinked, it had gone. I looked around. To my relief, I saw no sign of it. I sat my head back down on my pillow, hoping for some sleep. Then I opened my eyes. It was above my head, staring straight down. I screamed as it lunged down at me. I will never see a bear the same way again. A few years later, after the years of horror, I burned it. I sat in enjoyment as the bear was turned to smoking ashes in my fireplace. I have lived my teenage life through adolescence. The only thing I could remember that was in any way similar to my bad experience was when I watched Trainspotting. That baby scene shocked me so badly, but other than that, all was well. When I turned 19, I was about to move into my new home. I had been given the keys to the house and was ready to set up my furniture. After hours of carrying, I carried the final box from the removal truck into the front door and shut the door behind me. I turned to go into the kitchen and put it on the table. I opened it to see a cabinet. I took it out, walked into my new living room and placed it in the corner. I stared at it and thought to myself, I don't remember packing this cabinet. I didn't really care that much, as I had just moved into my new home. I walked back into the kitchen to grab my television and brought it into the living room when I saw it. The teddy, it just sat there, staring at me with those realistic blank eyes. It was beyond imagination, like something from a horror movie. My fears could not be contained, and whatever that bear or demon possessing it was, it knew I was scared. I threw it in the garbage and put a cinder block over the lid as I slept in my bed that night. Content and feeling a little more secure, I woke up that night and checked the time, 12:00 a.m. I heard a sound in the kitchen. I went to the kitchen and noticed that the outside door was wide open, with muddy paw tracks leading into the kitchen. I saw that one of my knives was gone from the holder, and then I heard something creeping behind me. I hightailed to my car and drove. I looked in the rear-view mirror and saw its face. It was holding a knife. I slammed the brakes, and it flew through the front windshield, stood up, and stared right into my eyes. I felt as if it was pulling me towards it. The only thing that would be coming towards it would be my 2 front wheels. I rammed into it. I felt a slight bump, sighed in relief, and drove away. Not even a minute after, I felt as if something was cutting at the bottom of my car. Then my car grinded to a halt. I went out to check it. There was a slash through my fuel tank. I ran for dear life to the nearest hotel to stay at. The only one was a mile away. I ran with every few feet. It was just one door behind. Once I got to the hotel, I fell on the bed with exhaustion. When I woke up, it was at the end of the bed. Every child fears under their bed. If they don't, they fear the closet. Or maybe that little crack in the almost closed door. Scientists know that children are more perspective. They see things adults don't. They aren't yet tethered into only accepting what society wants them to accept. They see what's truly there. They see the monsters in it. If you were to borrow a child's eyes and see through them for a night, you would go insane. To be able to see what you only dimly remember, burrowing into your covers while wearing those train pajamas, hoping to a god you can barely comprehend that it doesn't see you back, would drive an adult crazy. Because adults forget the rules. 1. Cover yourself. If you can't see it, it can't see you, even if it makes it harder to breathe. 2. Don't make a noise. Every whimper can lead to destruction. 3. Don't move, it attracts their attention. 4. Only light can make them go away, bright light. Flashlights make it worse. Teens are caught in the middle. They still feel what's there, but they cannot see, and they forget the rules. Why do you think there are so many insomniacs typing at their computer, subconsciously praying the light from their monitor will be enough to keep them away? It's not. Now look behind you with a child's eyes and try not to scream. It's Christmas Eve in snowy 1800s London, England, and in a small house at the edge of town, there lived a lonely 7-year-old boy named Isaac. Isaac was a sad child with not a friend to his name. While most children were spending time with their families and eagerly looking forward to opening the presents that were placed with care beneath a beautifully decorated Christmas tree, little Isaac spent this most holy of nights alone in his cold, dusty attic room. Isaac's parents were very poor. His mother was a strict crow of a woman who stayed at home and schooled Isaac. His father worked long hours down at the London harbour to support his family, although a large portion of his earnings went toward purchasing and consuming copious amounts of alcohol at the end of his shift. Sometimes he would come home drunk after being thrown out of every bar in London and shout at his beloved wife, Isaac's mother. Occasionally, it would escalate to violence, and he would beat her savagely. Then when he was done, he'd force himself upon her in a drunken sexual rage. As it so happens, this particular night was one of those occasions. Isaac just remained quiet, quivering beneath his soiled bed sheets until the screams and loud bangs subsided. Once poor frightened Isaac was finally able to fall asleep, he'd dream of what it would be like to have a friend to play with, so maybe he could laugh and be happy like the other children of London. Luckily for little Isaac, this Christmas Eve marked a big change when his abysmal loneliness caught the attention of a guardian angel, who then crafted a very special gift for the sad little London boy. As the sun rose on that Christmas morning, Isaac opened his eyes to find a strange wooden box sitting at the foot of his bed. With eyes widened in awe, he stared at the colorful handcrafted box, wondering who had left it. He was not used to receiving gifts, especially toys. What little toys Isaac did have were ones he'd found abandoned in the street or washed up in the gutters. Isaac scooted up to the foot of his bed in front of the mysterious box and picked it up with both hands. The box was beautifully painted in colorful styles with carvings of happy clown faces on the side. There was a tag on the box that simply read, "For Isaac." On the top of the box was an engraved text. Isaac squinted his eyes as he sounded out the words, "La Laughing J, Jack in a Bee Box." He paused. Laughing Jack in a Box? Isaac had heard of a jack-in-a-box, but never a laughing jack in a box. His mind spun with curiosity as he grasped the box's metal crank. Isaac tuned the crank and the song, "Pop Goes." The weasel chimed in rhythm with the crank's gyrations. As the song came to its climax, Isaac sang along with the final verse, "Pop goes the weasel," but nothing happened. Isaac let out a sigh. "It's broken." He placed the box back down on the edge of the bed and shuffled across his small, dusty room to his dresser, where he changed out of his soiled sleepwear and into his usual tattered clothes. Suddenly, Isaac heard a loud rattling noise coming from the bed behind him. He spun around to witness the wooden box violently shaking. Then, without warning, the top of the box swung open and a parade of colorful smoke and confetti bellowed out. Isaac rubbed his eyes in disbelief of what he was seeing. As the smoke cleared, there stood a tall, thin, multicolored clown man with bright red hair, a swirly, rainbow-colored cone nose, and feathery shoulders that sat atop his raggedy and colorful clown outfit. The Technicolor clown spread his arms and excitedly announced, "Come one, come all, whether big or small, to see the best clown of them all. The one, the only, Laughing Jack in a Box." Isaac's eyes lit up. "Who are you?" he asked. The colorful carny stepped down off the bed and with a happy grin said, "I'm glad you asked. I am Laughing Jack, your new friend for life. I'm magical. I never get tired of playing. I'm a whiz at the accordion, and I adapt and develop with your own changing personality. In other words, whatever you like, I like." Isaac looked up at the mysterious clown man. "We're friends?" he stuttered. Jack looked at the boy while cocking an eyebrow. "Friends? We're best friends. I was specially created to be your not-so-imaginary friend, Isaac." Isaac's jaw dropped. "You know my name?" Jack let out a whimsical laugh. "Of course I know your name. I know everything about you. So now that the introductions are out of the way, how would you like to play a game of I Spy?" Isaac grinned from ear to ear. "Really? We can play games? I'd love to. Oh." He paused. I can't. I have to go downstairs to see Mother for homeschooling and chores." His smile faded into a look disappointment. Jack placed his hand on Isaac's shoulder and with a warm smile said, "It's okay. I'll be waiting right here for you when you get back." Isaac's smile returned as he looked up at his new friend. Just then he heard his mother's shrill voice calling him from downstairs. "Well, I gotta go. I'll see you after I'm done, okay, Jack?" he said as he headed toward the door. Jack smiled. "Absolutely, kiddo. Oh, and Isaac." Isaac looked back at Jack, who gave him a wink and said, "You should wear that smile more often. It suits you." Isaac grinned happily as he turned and walked out the door. All day, Isaac told his mother about the amazing, colorful clown man who came out of a magical box that appeared on the foot of his bed. His mother, however, did not believe a word of it. Finally, he persuaded his mother to follow him up to his room so she could behold Laughing Jack for herself. They walked up the stairs and Isaac swung open the door to his room. "See, Mother? He's right, Isaac paused as he scanned the room that contained neither magical dancing clown man nor mysterious wooden box. Isaac's mother was not amused. She gave Isaac a glare so menacing it made his knees weak and his stomach sick. But Mother, he was..." Smack! Isaac's mother delivered onto him a swift, hard smack across his face. His eyes began to tear up and his lip began to quiver as he could feel himself about to break down. "You stupid, insolent child. How dare you lie to me about such childish idiocy? Who would want to be friends with a useless worm such as you? You shall remain in your room for the rest of the evening and shall receive no dinner. Now what do you say, you ungrateful wretch?" Isaac managed to swallow the knot in his throat in order to mutter a reply. Thank you, ma'am." His mother glared down at him for a moment before leaving the room in disgust. Isaac kneeled over, burying his face in the side of his bed. Streams of tears ran down his cheeks as he began to weep. "What's wrong, kiddo?" a voice called out. Isaac looked over to the edge of the bed where Laughing Jack was now suddenly sitting beside him. "Where were you?" Isaac murmured. Jack ran his hand through Isaac's hair to comfort him as he softly replied, "I was hiding. I can't let your parents see me, otherwise they won't let us play anymore." Isaac wiped the tears from his eyes. "Look, kiddo, I'm sorry I had to hide, but I'll make it up to you because tonight we can play games and have tons of fun," Jack said, smiling. Isaac looked up at his vibrant pal and silently nodded as a little smile began to form in the corners of his mouth. That night, Laughing Jack and Isaac played so many fun games. With a wave of his hand, Jack made all of Isaac's tin soldiers spring to life and march around the room. Isaac was amazed as he watched his toys move around the room on their own. Then, Laughing Jack and Isaac told each other spooky ghost stories. Isaac asked Jack if he was a ghost, but Jack explained that he was more of a cosmic entity of sorts. At the end of the night, Jack reached into his pocket and pulled out an assortment of delicious candy. Isaac was in ecstasy when he popped the first colorful treat in his mouth, as it was his first time tasting something so sweet. Isaac had so much fun and laughed so hard that night that things seemed to be finally looking up for little Isaac. at least until the incident that occurred 3 months later. Thank you for dropping by the archives and listening to our ghastly stories. Don't forget to like, comment, and lastly subscribe. Until next time, archivists, I bid you all good night.